Welcome to The Hidden Load for the educators and leaders in medicine who hold everyone up. We will tackle the hard topics and help you conquer your chaos and get to calm, all by starting to acknowledge and remove that hidden load. This podcast is a space for us to name the things that are common but not normal. Each week, we'll look at the invisible weight you're carrying and explore practical coaching-based tools to help you find more calm, better boundaries, and a sense of purpose that doesn't require you to run on empty. I'm so glad that you've carved time out for yourself today. Let's get into the episode. Welcome back to The Hidden Load. This is episode number 21, Medicine's Respect Gap, using your feedback without making it mean you are failing. I want to start today with 6 words that are a nightmare for almost every physician leader I know. She just doesn't understand the reality. Maybe for you, the words are slightly different. Maybe it's, he's too brusque, or I'd rather work with anyone else. In the house of medicine, we have a name for these moments. We call them bad feedback or personality conflicts. But today, I want to call it what it actually is, a hidden load. We spend our lives becoming experts. We collect many degrees, we master procedures, and we learn to power through every obstacle. But when feedback lands sideways, when it hits our character instead of our clinical skills, most of us just don't know how to carry it. We either defend against it or we let it crush us. And so today we are going to talk about how to stop making feedback a verdict on your soul and instead start making it a diagnostic data that you need to actually lead. I am Dr. Santina Wheat. I am a family physician, an educator, and a career and life coach. And I am here to help you conquer your chaos and get to calm so that you can enjoy sustainability in your career. Now, I want to share a moment that happened in the past. I was made aware of a comment a resident made after a particularly difficult interaction. They weren't speaking to me directly, but as often happens in the fishbowl of medicine, the comment made its way back. The resident said, I'm trying to avoid working with her. She's brusque, and honestly, she just doesn't really understand what's happening. Now, let's talk about the old version of me. The one who spent years grinding through residency and fellowship. That version of me had an immediate visceral reaction. I felt the heat in my chest, I felt my heart race, and my brain went straight into intellectual shield mode. I thought, I don't understand. I've been doing this. I understand the physiology, the billing, and the throughput better than that resident ever will. They're just being sensitive and just don't like me. They're lazy and they don't get the pressure that it is to be an attending. I was ready to dismiss that resident to protect my ego. But sitting with it, I realized that if I contextualized the feedback until it disappeared, I could miss the most important diagnostic data. And so you have to ask yourself, what if they're right? Not what if they're right about the medical knowledge, not what if they're right about my intelligence, but what if they're right about the fact that I'm not understanding their experience? What if my brusqueness, my efficiency, my drive has been a wall that's preventing me from seeing the reality for my own team? So some of us have the actual desire to vomit at feedback, right? But why does that sting so much? Why do we, as physicians, experience feedback as a threat to our survival? Well, it's because we don't actually experience that feedback as information. Instead, we experience it as a verdict. We don't feel, oh, the resident felt rushed, or they didn't understand where you were coming from, or they needed to learn it in a different way. Instead, we hear, you're an unkind and incompetent educator. This understanding is a direct result of our training. We were raised in a zero-error culture. Think back to M&M conferences where blame was going around or pimping on rounds. Mistakes were publicly shamed. And vulnerability was a liability. And in most scenarios, your professional identity was directly tied to being right. Our nervous systems learned a very logical but very painful lesson. Feedback equals danger. So when a colleague or a learner reflects something back to us, our brain doesn't see a growth opportunity. Instead, it sees a predator. We go into fight, flight, or freeze. We snap back, we fight. We avoid the person, flight, or we collapse into a shame spiral where we feel like we're failing, and that failing is at being a decent human, so we freeze. This is trauma-informed care applied inward. You aren't fragile. You're just practiced at surviving a system that uses feedback as a weapon. And if you haven't listened to it, you should go back and listen to our episode on trauma-informed care in healthcare with Dr. Cynthia Chen Joya. So here is the reframe that I want you to carry into your next shift. Feedback is actually data. It's not an identity statement. So when the resident said, "I didn't understand," they weren't making a statement about my medical degree. They were describing the climate of the environment. In medicine, brusque is often just the sound of a system under sustained load. I will say it certainly is for me. It's what happened when you are given all of your patients to the EHR and to the insurance companies, and you just have nothing left for the human being standing in front of you. And as a leader, you have to learn to treat feedback like an abnormal lab result. If you see a potassium of 6.2, you don't sit in your office and cry because you are a bad doctor. You don't yell at the lab and say, "Oh, they're too sensitive." No, instead, you say, "That's a critical value. What is causing this? What intervention do I need to take?" We need to be able to do that with these comments that we're hearing as well. "She's too brusque," exactly like that potassium level, is a critical value. It is a signal that the system, your system, may need an intervention. And just like that lab value, sometimes it comes out of nowhere and was an error, and it's okay to think about that too. And don't get me wrong, if these comments hurt and you need a moment to process and to cry, that's okay too. But let's shift how we use this information and how we grow from it. So for the educators and department heads listening, your reaction to feedback is the loudest thing that you say all day. It teaches your team how safe it is to be honest with you. When we defend, we tell our team that they need to too. Hide your mistakes. Don't tell me the truth if it's uncomfortable. But when we stay curious, we can help create a learnable environment. We can help say that it's okay to take that data and grow from it. True leadership is about the ability to move from that expert mode where we function as if we know everything into a curiosity mode where you're willing to learn about your own impact and learn how others are responding to it. If your residents feel like you don't get it, it doesn't matter how many papers you've published. If your team members feel like you don't get it, then you have lost the ability to lead them. And so bridging that respect gap starts with you being willing to look in the mirror, even if you don't like who is looking back in that moment. So what do we do when the feedback lands and it hurts? Well, I want you to use a simple reflection practice. Before you respond, before you explain, and definitely before you apologize and promise to never do it again, I want you to pause and ask yourself 3 things. The first is, what feels tender about this? This allows you to acknowledge the sting, and it's okay for it to hurt. And it lets you get at what was actually said and maybe not what you heard the first time. This helps you leave that reaction moment. So once you've identified what feels tender, then I want you to ask yourself another question. What feels true, even if it's just 1% of it? You certainly do not have to accept the whole verdict. But is there anything in it that's true, even a grain of it? Perhaps did you interrupt them? Were you looking at the computer while they talked, even if it was necessary for you to understand? Find the 1%. And then once you've found that 1%, ask yourself, what am I curious about changing? I didn't say fixing. I said changing. Maybe it will be just 5 minutes of uninterrupted eye contact tomorrow. Maybe it's, I need to look at the computer, but I'm going to tell them, hey, while I'm listening to you, I'm going to look at the computer because sometimes it helps me process better. That's it. No shame, no spiraling, just data. Now, when I'm honest, Tina, even 5 years ago, could not do this. Tina 5 years ago was 100% reactive to everything that was said. It was difficult to be curious. It was difficult to identify that 1%. But now that I think about it with intentionality, now that I pause before I respond, those comments are ways for me to understand what's happening around me and how I can interact better. And so now I choose to let that resident's comment be a map instead of a stick to beat myself with. I'm not going to lie, it's certainly not comfortable. And still, hearing things that I don't want to hear make me sad. But those things are information that I don't want to waste. And I don't want you to waste your feedback either. Don't contextualize the feedback until it disappears. Instead, use the feedback to bridge the gap between the expert that you are and the leader and educator that you want to be. Now, if you feel like you are powering through, but losing your team or yourself in the process, then maybe the things that you are doing are not aligned with your own purpose. And for that, I have created the 15-minute free. And for that, I have created the free 15-minute alignment check. This is a workbook that allows you to reset with your purpose. And you can find that in the show notes. Now, I want to zoom out for a moment, because while we've been talking about your internal reaction to a sting, the truth is that your response doesn't happen in a vacuum. It creates a ripple effect that changes the very DNA of your department. When you transition from the old version of yourself, the one that defends and contextualizes, to the now version of yourself, the one that listens and stays curious, you are doing something radically subversive in medicine. You are creating psychological safety. Now, we hear that term, psychological safety, thrown around a lot in HR and educational meetings, but let's talk about what that looks like. Psychological safety is not about everyone being nice, and it's not about lowering our standards. It is the exact opposite. It is about creating an environment where the standards are so high that we cannot afford to have people stay silent. Think about it. If a resident feels that you are brusque and that you don't understand, they aren't just going to swap their block. They're going to stop telling you when they are unsure about a medication dose. They're going to stop flagging the subtle change in a patient's status because they don't want to deal with the sting of your reaction. When we defend against feedback, we are effectively silencing our early warning systems. But when you model the now version of leadership, when you say, I hear you and I'm sitting with that, you are giving your team a permission slip to be honest. And that's so important in medicine. You are teaching them that this is the space and that the truth is more important than the hierarchy. This is how we move from a culture of compliance, where people do what they're told because they're afraid of the brusque attending, to a culture of commitment, where people speak up because they know their perspective is a vital part of the clinical picture. This is the higher calling of doing this internal work. It is not just about making your own load lighter, though it certainly does that. It's about ensuring that the next generation of physicians doesn't have to carry the same hidden load of fear that we did. It's about building a system where feedback is seen as a gift of clarity rather than a weapon of shame. You are the climate setter for your team. If you want a team that is resilient, honest, and high performing, you have to be the first one who was willing to stand in front of the mirror. And so I challenge you, the next time you get that feedback, sit with it and ask those questions. And if you feel like you are powering through but losing your team or yourself, then maybe you need to realign with your purpose. And for this, I created the free 15-minute alignment check. This is a workbook to help physicians and others in healthcare identify where their purpose is and if they're doing things that align with that. You can find that in the show notes. And if you're looking for more support, please feel free to reach out. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Load today. I'm Dr. Santina Wheat. Let's keep working to make this load a little lighter, and I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Load. If today's conversation spoke to you, I would love for you to share it with a colleague who might need to hear it too. It's one of the simplest ways we can start shifting the culture of medicine together. And remember, your time spent reflecting here matters. You can earn free CME or CE credits for listening to today's episode through the Pinnacle app. You'll find that link in the show notes. If you are looking for one-on-one coaching support or want to dive deeper into the resources we discussed today, let's connect. You can find information on how to reach me in the show notes. And don't forget to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And leave me a rating so that others can find me too. And take care of yourself because you deserve to be held up too. And I'll see you next time.